All right, thank you for joining us. Welcome back to Cosmic Cowboy Roaming the Weird West. I'm here again with Diana to get the astrology forecast and to touch on the Mars cazimi and all the little transit events that are happening. If you didn't watch the previous episode, you can find Diana on YouTube at Out Amongst the Stars Astrology, or her website outamongstthestars.com, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And Diana is an astrologer and also an emotional empowerment coach. I've personally used Diana's coaching and have found huge benefits. So highly recommend her for astrology readings, for coaching. It's awesome. Really love her work. And I think she's a Facebook group too that you can find through the YouTube channel. But yeah, we're going to get into the transits that are coming up and stuff that's happened just recently. Maybe discuss the eclipses that rocked everybody. Yeah, where do you want to start?
I think that's exactly where we'll start. Thank you so much, Cass, for having me on your channel. It's totally a pleasure, and I love sharing the astrology. And yeah, I think that's where we'll start, is with the eclipses, even though they were last month. But
Yeah,
I think
I feel like we're still feeling them a little bit, though.
Yeah, if you didn't get like completely, had something very significant right at that moment, just keep in mind that the eclipse energy actually can last for 6 months until we hit the next ones, right? So,
oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, it can. Yeah, it can be an effect, and things might have started in motion. You might get an indication of what has to happen, that has to leave, has to change, or a fated connection or event, and then you feel the energies, going through till we hit the next ones in the background. So yeah, we had the annular solar eclipse. That was October 14th in Libra. And so that really actually affected the nodes we're in right now. We had the change of the nodes into the Aries Libra axis. So, we really do need to look at that north node of Aries, of what
when
it
did
is.
the nodes move?
So they had actually they moved kind of in the summer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think it was in August or July. I'd have to look back at when it actually moved. But anyway, that doesn't really matter. This was the first eclipse because it's still within that degree range.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so it like and so we had an eclipse coming up then at the end of the month of October, and the node had moved, but the eclipse was actually still in the other axis of the Scorpio. So
okay.
yeah, so we had since July 17th was when the north node had moved in, right around there. Yeah, so that moved into Aries, and the south node, of course, into Libra. And so everybody will want to look at the houses that occupies for themselves.
Yeah,
and sure. And just keep in mind that Aries is self, the I am energy, and the Libra is the relationship energy. And so then when we went into the Scorpio one, so that one was actually on the 28th. And I actually went through even for these eclipses, I went through all the houses for the rising sign for everyone on my YouTube, if anybody had wanted to kind of go back and check that.
Ooh, I'll have to go check that out. Yeah, I didn't see that one.
Yeah, so you just go based off your rising sign, though, is the best. I mean, you can look at sun, but the way that the chart set up, that puts that rising sign in the first house, and then we look at where that eclipse axis is happening from there. So then that it pertains to that actual house. So that is very helpful. And so then that next one was this. We had that Scorpio new moon, or sorry, that Scorpio eclipse on the 28th of October.
That was a new moon eclipse, right?
Yeah, so that's exactly right. That was the new moon eclipse. Yeah. And so we had some new beginnings happening. And of course that node was leaving the Scorpio axis, but Scorpio, of course, we know that energy is, it wants to go deep, it wants to dig in, it wants to get to the underground and go, it's passionate, it's intense, it's not the light fluffy energy by any means. So
Yeah.
if anybody really felt that something left, it was because it was meant to, it was meant to. Or if anything happened around that date, it actually, you had to keep in mind that that was a fated event that's trying to push you in that other direction, right, of whatever we wanted for our own sovereignty and where we're headed. I mean, we're all getting this total upgrade of consciousness anyway. But the thing is with Scorpio, then it wants to dig into the underneath what's been under the surface. So that's, that's what made it probably a little more challenging and feeling a little more challenging in some ways. So, but then from there, we had on November, or sorry, yeah, no, that actually, the new moon was on the 13th of November, because that eclipse at the end of October was to do with the full moon.
Oh, okay.
But that new moon was in Scorpio. So that's, I'm sorry, I got confused. Yeah, that actually, that ended the month. Yeah, it was in Taurus. That other one was in Taurus. Yeah. So the new moon in Scorpio, though, felt like an eclipse. That was the whole thing, was that it had that Uranus opposition. So it was really kind of shaking some things up for people. And
you said that was the 17th?
That was on the 13th of November.
13th. Okay, yeah.
At 20 degrees of Scorpio. The new moon.
Yeah. Shaking things up makes sense. Yep.
Yeah. Sorry. Sorry to have confused you, because our eclipse was actually in Taurus at the end of October, and then this new moon in Scorpio was definitely one that was then really filled with a lot of Scorpio energy. And people were like wondering kind of why it still felt eclipsy, and it was because it was because we had all of that Uranus energy that was opposing it, because Uranus is in Taurus, right? And it just happened to be at that same degree. So then what made it even more interesting was that new moon was conjunct Mars.
Okay,
yeah. So, and Mars is that god of war, and as people consider it. So we had this real Scorpio emotional like intensity, and it's kind of bringing in a volatile connection with the Mars with it. And and then of course we had a lot of things that were, I guess, taking us into our future. But it brought a lot of extremes with the energy, because it's so sudden, it's so like unexpected, unpredictable, and that Uranus comes in and it's like a lightning bolt. Like it doesn't, Scorpio moves more slowly and goes deeper, but that Uranus might just, boom, something's happened and it totally flips your life right around. And then with that malefic Mars there, that doesn't that doesn't help. So I'm not sure if anybody has been feeling that a lot of Mars energy in the ethers of I know that that kind of right around that time I kind of got grabbed by the planet. I was just really annoyed. Like I was just annoyed and kind of like harsh with my words, where typically I was kind of even keeled, but I felt like there was one day that I was just like, I'm just irritated, right? I just better just go stay over here, because anything you say is not going to help matters.
Yeah.
And
And so like on the 13th there, like the cazimi was on the 17th. So was that 13th, like that date, was that sort of like in the shadow of the cazimi, or how does that work? Or is that totally separate?
no, it's not separate because it's just the way the transits were moving, right? So we had the new moon is the moon and the sun together.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had that Mars was at 22 degrees.
Okay.
And so it's considered conjunct. But the
Gotcha.
new moon itself was at 20 degrees, right?
Oh, okay.
So it was, so the moon and the sun got together and we had that, starting of new things. But we had just 2 degrees ahead of it, the Mars. They kind of they've been traveling kind of together. And typically
Oh, okay.
Mars shoots way ahead, but it's just the way that this transit is going. And then the Uranus, it was at 21 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
So they were all within that 1 to 2 degree of each other, right? So that's what, and when you have that, that energy is infused in that new moon. So yeah. So then what happened from there is we had that Mars cazimi, and because the sun started to then get, it's moving faster, started to get closer and closer to catch up to Mars. And so with that, when it kind of gets close to the rays of the sun, where they actually call it combust, and it isn't until it gets right into the heart of the sun that it's considered a cazimi. And there's different people in astrology that say that it's within that 1 degree you can consider it cazimi, and there's others that actually say that it needs to be within 16 or 17 minutes of arc, so very, very close.
Yeah.
But either way, we still feel that, and that cazimi comes from actually the Latin word of a cazmimi, which that means in the heart. So what happens is Mars goes through there, and essentially what they say, from the rays of the sun, it gets purified,
Mm-hmm.
and we start a whole new Mars cycle. So this particular Mars cycle is in Scorpio, and so that happens for the next 2 years until we end up with a new Mars cazimi. We are kind of in that Marsy energy, which in Scorpio, it's actually the traditional ruler. So that is very, very helpful. Yeah. So it can help you initiate things. It can help new beginnings, like really like powerful new beginnings.
Mm-hmm.
And with Mars, it wants you to have like that. It's sort of that what gives you energy when you are kind of in the morning, when you hit the ground, right? It's that outward energy, that personal drive, and whatever kind of initiates you to take action on things. However, it also has that God of War. It's people with that really strong Mars energy, and especially like one in Aries, like they would want to be using a lot of tools or weapons, or they have a lot of cutting is connected with that Mars energy, or cutting out. And when it's in Scorpio, it brings in like a lot of strategic energy, or very powerful, has a lot of strength, and there's potential for things, because Mars is that action oriented one, and Scorpio kind of has that deep darkness to it, right? They can be the detective type, as well, or even military type thing. So
I know like this particular alignment, I guess to say. I was reading up on it a little bit and talking in a Discord with some people. The last time this was seen, like the Soviet Union came to an end. There were a couple other wars that came to an end pretty brutally. And then I guess because Uranus is in there messing things up as it does.
Yeah.
It's a little scary, a little spicy for this transit. And I guess just seeing what's going on in the world right now, it kind of makes sense that
Yeah.
there might be something big coming.
Yeah.
So how long, like, what is the duration of this? Because like the most potent time of this cazimi, is it just the day of, or like,
yeah, I mean, you can stretch it to 1 degree on either side of the sun,
okay,
being 1 degree on either side. So it's kind of within that, within that day, right? Because
okay,
the sun, moves day to day. And sometimes people would say it was within that few hours, but
yeah,
a lot of people do stretch it to that degree either side. However, it had a trine to Neptune, which would allow some softening sometimes of that, right?
okay,
And so the Neptune was in Pisces at 24 degrees, so it's still within that range, and can hopefully then brought in a little bit of softness. And of course, this all has to do with your in particular chart and how it kind of hits you, and where that Scorpio house is also very significant, because it's going to, for the next couple of years, really affect that house that you have Scorpio in. So that's actually, like, for me, it's my 10th house, right? It's my career house. So, and it's really not at the top of my chart because my midheaven's in Sag, but in Scorpio, that 10th house is that, legacy, or how you're seen out in the world. For some people, if they have Scorpio in the 12th house, like, someone I know, it may affect them quite differently. They might want to be more internal, right? And actually, in the Mars or the cazimi in Scorpio, the last time it happened was in November of 1991.
yeah.
So was that what you were looking at? Like, did you go into Wikipedia?
I was just reading like the Chani horoscope.
Oh, and Chani's, yeah.
I was reading there and then talking in a Discord with an astrologer as well. And they had brought up the fact that the Soviet Union ended in line with the cazimi, and it was a pretty brutal shakeup of things. So yeah, it intrigues me just based on what's going on in current events. I don't keep up with current events because it just really tanks my mental health. So I couldn't speak to any specific events that happened with the cazimi this time around, but seems to be something that's relevant to kind of keep an eye on. Just
yeah, for sure. Actually, we have seen of course we got, and I'm not very good at the mundane astrology at all. It's not my thing either. But at least we have seen a little bit of reprieve. Like, we just had this 4-day reprieve to try to get, some of the people, that the hostages, or people who were needing to get out of these war zones out. So
in like Israel, you mean?
I don't want to actually, like, with that war, there's been something that's happened just as of recent. So so that trying to Neptune with the compassion and having a little more, that might have helped that. And but like, for anybody that wants to look at the history of it, they could go to Google or Wikipedia or whatever, because there were some astrologers that actually were talking about the different events and the wars and things that were going on back then. And then if you were around at that point, like if you were alive and or old enough, maybe you could look at, but I know for you younger people, that makes it a little challenging.
Yeah.
For me, because I am older, I actually started in 1991. I started a whole new career, in the sense that I started my post-secondary.
Okay.
Yeah. So
very cool.
So now we had like the last one, because they happen every 2 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we had a Mars cazimi in October in Libra in 2021.
Okay.
So the last 2 years, you could look at like where were things happening with, relationships or, harmony or justice and, certain sort of Venusian themed things, or wherever
Yeah.
that house system is. And the one prior to that in 2019 was in Virgo.
Mm-hmm.
So, that would have been all to do with organizing and details or wherever that house was for you. And then prior to that one was the Leo one in 17. And that might have initiated for some people. I'm just going back to these ones that were a little more in your,
Yeah.
adult lives, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that one in Leo, it was like, where were you initiating your, boldness or your courage or,
Mm-hmm.
things like kind of doing stuff for your own self. So,
Yeah.
but it does bring that initiating energy. So now we're into that for like until 2025.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but knowing that, we're dealing with Mars, it's like, then if there was anger that was involved, or there's things that are making you angry, it's just a matter of, taking that step back. And
Mm-hmm.
there's, um, ways that we can use it constructively rather than destructively.
Yeah.
And it's just knowing, how we can approach things differently. And when we're using that anger as our jet fuel to
Yeah.
move into whatever it is. And there's little like processes in our, coaching that we're like, if you're really feeling something, there's little processes that we can do as sort of addressing people like, when you do this thing, I feel like this
Mm-hmm.
certain way, right? And
Yeah.
would you be willing to to do that differently?
Yeah.
So, I mean, anger is actually, if going into a little bit more with that, anger is actually quite high on the scale of consciousness. It's kind of just below the midpoint. I mean, it's not really a midpoint because of the way the scale like works. But if we're talking like in the lower vibrations of where we resonate emotionally, the guilt and the shame and victimhood and that kind of thing, and where we go from there is into grief, and then fear is higher than that. And so anybody that's really feeling very anxious and a lot of anxiety with everything that's going on in the world, that's just at that level of fear. There's just that underlying fear that is trapped in the cells of our body.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to shine light on if any of fears came up during that time. Shine the light on it, of like going to the mirror even to do exercises and bring up what it is that you're afraid of, and
Yeah.
say it out loud, and then really look at it like, okay, is this just perceived fear? And because it creates that chronic fear turns into that constant anxiety, right, where you're
Oh yeah.
hyper
Yeah.
vigilant,
Constant
right?
paranoia. Yeah. I know for
Mm-hmm.
myself, like usually anger is an attempt to control something that I'm afraid of or that I'm anxious about. And I know like when the cazimi happened, like anger for me came up in the form of just the stuff that I've been dealing with the car accident, and then now just with like work and stuff. And um but like looking at that anger more in depth, it was fear of lack of control in those areas.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the whole thing. I think a lot of people are really feeling that right now, just because our world is changing so quickly, and we're having a lot of these things, evolve from the surface, or under the surface, to bring it to the surface, so that we can do better and be better.
Mm-hmm.
And so, just above fear is desire, right? And so it's like trying to keep the focus on what it is that you desire. And when that anger, which is above that, creeps in, it allows you to kind of take action towards that rather than getting paralyzed by the fear of the changes that we need to make. Because I believe honestly that everybody, these eclipses were doozies, because like I said, the end of the month one was in Taurus, and that had that, you know, Uranus and Jupiter energy. And you know, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but Uranus and Jupiter are coming together, so it's expanding on something like new and exciting in the house of wherever your Taurus is. But in the mundane in Taurus, you know, that's to do with our earth, that's to do with our food, that's to do with everything material, all, you know, has to do with our five senses. So we're going to see that that'll be in April, in the spring. Yeah. And that's a really exciting energy to, you know, be following and looking forward to for 2024. But we'll get back into 2023. But yeah, did that help explain the cazimi, where it kind of goes through and it starts that whole new?
Yeah, I just, like I said, I wasn't sure if it had like the shadow period, kind of like the eclipses do, or like the Venus retrograde, like, you know, like it seems certain transits have a much longer impact than others do. They're not still actively showing up in the chart, kind of thing. One thing I did want to talk about, solar returns. I know I didn't realize like how many people have birthdays in November. And I've been seeing a ton of people that I didn't even realize had a birthday in November, you know, crop up on my social media or whatever. And I've seen it talked about a little bit. So I don't know if you'd be up for touching on like solar returns and what that sort of means beyond, you know, gaining another year.
Yeah, besides being another year older.
Yeah.
Well, the solar return chart doesn't take over your natal chart. However, it does set the trajectory of wherever those planets are, especially related to the sun and, you know, the moon, the more personal planets, for that year.
Just a tangent for 1 second. So if you want to look at your solar return chart, you're just looking at the chart on your birthday this year, like, and that'll give you.
I would go onto Astro and actually put in solar, like go draw on the drop down menu instead of natal, and you can combine the natal with the solar.
I didn't know you could do that. Okay.
Yeah, with the solar, because my solar return, it doesn't end up on my birthday. I was born close to midnight. It usually is about the 17th.
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh. And where the sun aligns again with the sun. So
I see. Okay.
Yeah. So it brings it back around in your sun's aligned with the sun, and then it sets from that point where the planets are in the sky at that moment. And so this year, I know for me, mine ended up on a new moon, and it was in a pretty stacked house. So we'll see how that all shakes out. But it's a really great thing to look at for, you know, in and around your birthday, just to sort of see what the flavor of your year is going to be. And I know when I had mine done when I was in my schooling, I had mine done by one of the TAs, and she could see where I was just going to be studying for the next year. And she was right. So that is something to definitely look at and have done, and you can go look at it yourself. And you know what else you can look at even is lunar returns, monthly. You can kind of and that of course affects our emotional and subjective kind of reality. And it's, you know, not the vitality that our sun brings us, it's that more emotional body and connected to that.
I just pulled mine up here. So my solar return is on the 25th, which is my birthday, but it's at 7:21. And my birth time is 12:24. So that's interesting that it's that little bit off, you know.
Yeah, and you're gonna have, because you had a birthday not too long ago.
I know it's on Saturday here.
Or coming up. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're gonna have these planets that we're in right now, this planetary, all this Saggy energy, like we're just moving, like now, like lots of the planets are moving into Sag, right? And we had Venus move into Libra on the 8th of November. And but then on the 9th, Mercury moved into Sag, and then today we had Sun move into Sag, and then the 22nd of November, and then November 24th, Mars will be moving into Sag.
Oh, okay.
So what
It's
makes
interesting because I just pulled up the transits too, and so on the 25th, it's showing me Mars is at like 29 degrees Scorpio on my return, so it's not quite there yet. But also, like the Sun is at like 1 degree Sag, and my Sun is at 3 degrees Sag. So I thought for solar returns, like they line up.
Oh, is that what it shows on the Astro?
Yeah, I'll send you mine, or I guess you have mine on your account. Probably you can pull it up later.
Yeah,
we can talk about that later, just so it's not so specific to me.
right.
But yeah, that's neat. I never knew. I always just thought it was like I didn't. I don't know. I didn't consider the fact that everything would be different, with the exception of your Sun for the most part.
Yeah,
kind
and
of
then
cool to see what's lining up with what here.
Yeah.
That's neat. I'm gonna have to dive into that later.
Yeah.
Cool. So in terms of like your solar return, like is there anything in particular that you would suggest people take a look at?
Well, just how it aspects the Sun is, a really important thing. Any aspects of the other planets to the Sun.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. So and then and I haven't gotten completely, I guess it's sort of like looking at the whole transits as well of in general to your natal chart, as well as the actual solar return. So like there's the solar return chart that you have, and it's going to show all the different aspects of where the planets are in the sky in correlation to that, but then you can also compare it to your natal chart. Yeah. So okay. So there's a whole, that's a whole reading in itself, right?
Yeah. That's it's a lot to look at. Like just looking at it now, and I'm like, oh my goodness, like I can already see. I forget what it's called when they're 3 houses away, but my Sun and my Saturn are 3 houses apart.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, like my Chiron is like almost conjunct my moon. My midheaven and my ascending are conjunct. Yeah, very interesting. There's a lot that I'm gonna have to dive into. Like as I'm looking at this, I'm like, oh my goodness, what's this mean? What's this mean? Like,
oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to have a look at it later.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I guess in the next like month or so, what big transits are we going to be anticipating here? Like obviously you said the April one there for Uranus and Jupiter.
Yeah, and we're not
like,
going to
what
look
about
at
like
that
December-ish?
one. Yeah, we're not going to look at that one at all right now, but we'll look at well, with November, with all the Sag energy, it's important for us to keep that in mind of where that house is, of course, but that's going to feel a lot different than the Scorpio, because the Scorpio is so deep in depth and under the ground, and the Sag energy, it brings in a lot more of that 30-foot view, right? It's the eagle that's soaring over and looking at like being more adventurous and or freedom and joyful, and what brings us joy in that, all these abundance and expansion. Anything Jupiter touches, it expands on things to do with your beliefs and your philosophies and that sort of thing. So we have also Mercury in Sagittarius, which that changes kind of the way that our thought patterns are. It's our thought processes, right? And so it's a communication we'll find maybe a lot different too. Like in Scorpio, they definitely will speak a lot of truth, and they do want to go into depth when that Mercury is in Scorpio. But in Sag, you might, like anybody who might have a Sag Mercury or out in the ethers, you might notice people just talking more bluntly or more boldly. It's just a lot different way of communicating. And so what I want to bring in though is we also before it went into Sag, we had a Scorpio Pluto sextile. So that was just on the 20th here. So there might have been a lot of things that were coming up at feeling like, we want to dive into what we're really passionate about and our purpose. And I don't know if, there was a feeling of regenerating and renewal and that death and rebirth. Like Pluto really has wanted to, bring in that. And of course, it's the modern ruler of Scorpio as well, right? And but what the big part of this particular sun moving into Sag, even though it feels like more free and enthusiastic and optimism, and it's a little bit more wild and untamed and unbound, what happened is as soon as it's gone in there, it's squaring Saturn.
Oh.
So that's a really big sort of foot on the gas and at the brake on the brake at the same time, right? It makes it a lot more challenging. So because it might actually just put into check all of our big plans that we have. It's like, oh, I want to do this and I want to go forward and I want to make this happen, and all our excitement and enthusiasm, and then Saturn comes in and says, no, this is your responsibilities, here's your limitations, we're cutting this out, or you're getting this lesson, or there's these boundaries in place. It also could be having a if you're getting kind of excited and enthusiastic, kind of getting into, maybe even because it's that square, a conflict with some sort of authority figure too, which it can bring in that as well, right? Because that Saturn figure has that. So we it has that energy about it. So we're feeling that one, which makes it kind of pulls back a little bit. And so if you're feeling a little melancholy too, that's that Saturn coming into play and pulling down on that Saggy energy. Yeah.
I guess this is kind of, in my mind, like if you've got any big pursuits going ahead with like the Sag energy, like it's sort of just asking you to take a step back and like consider before rushing in. In one sense, it is like tamping down the enthusiasm, which can be negative, but at the same time, like, sometimes that's a good thing. Like
sometimes
things in, because I know for myself, like that Sagittarius energy is so prevalent in my life, where I get so excited about one certain thing. My niece makes fun of me because she's like, you just react before you think sometimes. Like, and the example she always uses is this one time we were driving in the country, and like obviously sheep are not a huge thing in Alberta, but we were driving and I thought there was this field full of golden retrievers, and I just about hit the ditch doing full speed because I got so excited, and then it turned out it was just sheep. Like, she always uses that as like the peak Sagittarius moment of just excited before even thinking logically, like just running out the door, not even thinking about it, just go do the thing. And so in some sense, like Saturn is a good thing for me in that aspect, because sometimes I get these ideas, I'm just like, we're doing this and we're doing it now, we're going, and no thought process beforehand. Like
so that is absolutely the truth. Over aggressive, over assertive, overzealous, overexcited, and you're absolutely right that sometimes it's good to have that Saturn in there, because sometimes you can totally have that over optimism about certain things, and I get that. I have a Sag moon, so I'm like, this is gonna be the best, and like go forward, and then it's like, oh wait a minute, what about all the
what about everything else?
Everything else, all the other steps in between. So and because Mars is traveling right close there, then guess what happens? Then Mars enters Sag on the 24th, and then on the 25th, Mars squares Saturn as well. So any of your really, so not only like your, things that are lighting you up and all the vitality of the sun, then all your outward drive to do things is going to get hit by that Saturn as well. So you might be just faced with challenges or delays or responsibilities or frustrations, or feeling like lack of self-confidence or self-worth, things that might kind of creep in for those few days. And that's kind of happening over the weekend and into early next week. So if you're feeling a little drained or a little knocked down or like, lost because you're, getting really affected by the Saturn, just take your time to rest, like reprieve, like just, allow yourself that time or go do something that makes you feel good, like the Saggy energy. So you might not feel like really drained or melancholy. So then maybe you want to bring in more Sag and go do something adventurous and joyful and fun to sort of lift yourself up, right? But just knowing like it is gonna feel like a little, want to go forward and being held back at the same time.
Held back, that makes sense.
Yeah. So and then like later this month here, then we have a Mercury is going to trine the North Node in Aries. So you might have, some thoughts of where you want your North Node to be headed, and different ideas might come in and that kind of thing. And then the 27th, it's squaring Neptune. So Mercury squaring Neptune, just that one can be a little bit tough because it can either bring in just a real dreamy kind of flowy, like if you're writing poetry or, a song or something might be great. But at the same time, it can be delusions or untruths or things kind of, coming through. So it depends on how, it reflects for you in your own particular chart. But just know that if you're feeling a little spacey or a little foggy or things are a little bit unclear for the end of the month here, it's just that Neptune energy has come in. So now what's happening also this weekend is we're hitting the Mercury shadow. So when you were talking about, a cazimi having shadow and it doesn't really, it just has that little kind of degree, which sets a trajectory for the next 2 years of that house that it is in. With the Mercury, we know we have that shadow period. So it's hitting those degrees and of where it's going to retrograde back to.
Yeah.
And so we are in Mercury retrograde to start out with in Sagittarius. And on the 12th of December, then the Mercury will station retrograde. So that's when we'll start to, have the effects of that. So if anybody's making travel plans or, buying technology, maybe you want to do your Christmas shopping like before the 12th. Just saying, if it's electronic.
When is it out of retrograde?
So then, December 22nd is because it actually moves into Capricorn on December 1st, right?
Okay.
So we're in the shadow starting now, and then on December 1st it will enter Capricorn. So it goes into Capricorn stations on the 12th, and then on the 22nd it shifts back into Sagittarius in that retrograde moment. And it'll be out January 1st is then.
So I'm going to call it now, big snowstorm that messes up travel plans. That's my bet.
Yeah. Actually, I'm a weather junkie. And I follow these storm chaser guys and people who do amazing things online. And it's more in the US, right? They have these big setups and they're even far more detailed and better because they're live chasing things, and also have all kinds of different software and tools they use. Well, they're predicting a huge snowstorm for the American Thanksgiving.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's already, today, is it not? Today or tomorrow?
Tomorrow, yeah. So after Thanksgiving, the weather pattern changes. And I just know they were just chasing some tornadoes there. So we're definitely getting that clash of cold and warm happening already. Yeah. So we'll see what happens in the US. But it's crazy because we have not yet had snow where I'm at.
Really? Wow. It's snowing here in Calgary right now.
Yeah, it's snowed there lots.
I'm shocked because like you're a lot further north. Usually you guys get cold and stay cold.
We have not had any snow. We had maybe one little skiff that melted. Yeah. It's just been very, yeah, it's been very, very seasonably warm. Like it's been awesome. We're all like, oh, this is so great. Today
Yeah.
it's cooler, but we still never got the snow that came through more south, yeah, and
Yeah.
west. So
Wow.
yeah, so and of course we're going to be, like I had mentioned, some of the Mercury Sag, uh, when Mercury goes into Capricorn, that's a whole different energy too, right? It's also very logical and rational, and so people are going to be wanting to do things in that very practical manner, and get all their ducks in a row, but we might get a little mess up from the retrograde of that. And yeah, so that retrograde this year is taking us right through the whole Christmas time. So
Gotcha.
yeah, there might be a few returns
Family
on the
disputes.
electronics. Well, yeah, hard to say how it's going to manifest for people. I would just be careful with the shopping, and because that's when
Yeah.
people really want to buy, right? Do all the
Yeah.
shopping. You might want to do more Black Friday than closer to Christmas. So
Yeah.
yeah, so then we actually, on the 27th, we have this full moon in Gemini at 4 degrees. And so the full moon in Gemini,
And that's on December 27th?
no, November 27th,
Oh, okay.
coming up
Yeah.
here. Yeah. And so then we have the Gemini energy, the moon in Gemini, the sun in Sag, and we have that opposition. And of course, the Sag is considered like kind of both, and it's like that big picture, and the Gemini is that this and that, or like Gemini is running around getting all these little facts and details, and Sag wants the big picture. So that's going to be like in opposition, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, and we do have a lot of the Sag energy, but that moon in Gemini is, which Sag has also to do with our future and our beliefs and our morals, and potentially spiritual, religious beliefs, as well as the ethics that and good fortune and expansion and that kind of thing, and the big broader picture. And then the little Gemini is kind of affecting that, where it might be more of like our emotional needs, all the little details. There might be conversations that you might need to have that come in, because of course it's that Gemini, the Mercury ruled Gemini in that with the moon. That's where the moon is. It might be really great for like communication, but thoughts and writing and speaking and all of those, verbalizing how you feel, because lots of times that opposition has to do with finding and integrating in relationships and that sort of thing too, and maybe having some meaningful conversations. It is in square to Saturn too, right? So then there's that reality check of that. So are we, it's sort of like, what is it, all the little bits and details and conversations we need to have in order to get to that big picture and all the things that we're really wanting in our lives. That's changing and shifting, and we just have to be okay with it. I don't think I know one person that isn't kind of really going through a shift or a change right now. These those eclipses, and then that Uranus shaking up with the new moon was definitely bringing in just brought in oh my gosh, you know what, this is what I thought, and now I'm like, no, I don't think that's right for me. Yeah. Or something that had gone on for too long, and then it's just like, you know what, this finally does have to change. This has to come into my life and be part of my life going forward, and I got to let go of whatever it is that's in the way of that Mars cutting energy, cutting things out that don't serve you. So the depression can come in lots of times when you're hanging on too much to the past, I always say. And the anxiety comes in when we're just too focused on the future.
Yeah.
And so it's like that fear of the future and fear of like, oh, I thought this was the way this was supposed to go, and then it didn't. And then you're like, oh my gosh, what's next, right? So then you just start in the racing. However, we are all being pushed in our own direction that is going to feel a lot different. So it's a matter of taking the breath, getting back in the body, and getting connected with emotionally, where are we resonating, and working through the so they don't get stuck, right? They don't get stuck in our cells and our nervous system, and so that you're resonating higher. And that's the all to do with the empowerment of stuff, of course, rather than the astrology. But just find yourself so that you can work through, process, digest all those different emotions that want to, come in, so they don't get held on to. And no, we can't hold on to our past too much right now. For sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's one thing, like, just kind of that I've been seeing generationally, and for myself as well, is how much the world has changed. And also, I guess, like, how much is out in the open. Like, a lot of stuff that's gone on, say, politically, like, it's always gone on, but it's very out in the open now, and nobody seems to care. Or if they do care, they're caring about other things, just looking at, like, what's going on politically in our province right now, while these huge international things are going on. Like, they're really taking advantage of what's going on. And I mean, we're only cognizant of it now because of the 24-hour media news cycle. Like, we wouldn't have known it, 10 years ago, but now it's so blatant, and people just kind of ignore it. And it sort of is like, years ago it was ignorance is bliss kind of thing. So it is kind of wishful thinking of going back to that past, but at the same time, like, hanging on to that doesn't serve, that doesn't help. And hanging on to thinking it was better before doesn't help either. Like, there's a lot of changes that need to happen now. And I think it's kind of hard because we want to go back to the way it was when it was happier times, but at the same time, like, it wasn't much different. Like, now we're cognizant of it, and we need to make these huge scale changes. And the question really is, like, are we going to let go of the past and make those changes or not?
Well, the question is how are you going to let go of the past and make those changes? Because, we have been in a lot of outer planet, which are the slower moving energies that really allow the, big shifts to change. That's what makes us all different, even in our generations, is how and where those slower moving outer planets are. Well, we're going now to a time where things are going to be moving all direct. So we had Saturn station direct in the beginning of November here, on the 4th. And then in December, later in the month, we have Jupiter going forward, as well as Chiron. And then in January, Uranus will station direct. So then we'll have all our outer planets and moving forward. And then guess what happens near the end of January? The big, real shift of Pluto into Aquarius. So we had a little dip of that in the spring. And bringing in what our new kind of 20-year cycle of Pluto, our transformational regenerative death and rebirth planet, is going into this fast moving technology, futuristic, humanitarian, more sovereign sort of roots, grassroots up, rather than hierarchy and power over energy of Aquarius, Pluto and Aquarius, compared to all the structures, systems, hierarchy, patriarchy of the Capricorn. And that Pluto and Aquarius is moving in at the end of January. It's going to have a 40-day dip back into Capricorn very briefly in the fall, but really, we're really getting set for that Pluto and Aquarius here starting
That's
next
going to be
year.
interesting. I think, like, Pluto and Aquarius, and you're saying, like, grassroots and changing things up. And then we've got, you said Jupiter and Taurus. So, like, how we, like, food and, like, how we engage with our planet.
Yes.
I really wonder what that's going to look like. It's a little concerning, but it's also kind of exciting as to what that might look like.
I feel that every person on this planet does have to take a look at how within their own life can they bring themselves back to our inherent core beings of nature, right? Like, where our energy is connected to nature, and how it came from that, the whole natural elements, and getting getting a little bit more back to the basics of nature through, and the healing from nature, and the, grounding in nature, and bringing in the different elements, and the, less, disposable, and all the industrialization that we've brought in has, it's starting to affect our planet. So we have to now take a step back, right? And it starts with us. And even when it comes to all of this war in the world, is that emotionally getting upset about it or being in fear of it, like, is not going to help all of that out here. So it starts within, as within, so without, as above, so below, right? Like finding that center in us, because we either operate from fear or love. Like really, there's just the basis of the two. And, just trying to find that sense of safety from within. And also, yes, we can stand up for things that, and we need to change some things, but we have to watch how we do it, because bringing in a lot more anger with it, if we're using it destructively rather than constructive with that motion of the anger, it only creates more, right? More divide, more fight, more. So where can you make it different? Where can you channel that anger to make that difference? That's going to allow more unity and love and back to nature, and being more about even the Aquarius energy, which is more about humanity and as a whole.
Well, and that's what I was going to say too, is like one thing that I've noticed, especially with people my generation and younger, is the narrative has become, oh, the planet's dying, it's done, humanity's done. And you look at any instance in which severe environmental war, like any sort of like big scale disaster happens, it's not that humanity gets wiped out. I mean, obviously we're here, but like it's that it takes out so many people that there is an opportunity for a new beginning. And I think people are so hung up on this is the end. This is the new beginning. Like, especially with the Aquarius energy coming out of Capricorn, I really wonder, like, is that narrative going to crumble so that people can actually see the hope for the future? Because quite honestly, like, as scary as it is, if say the plot of the movie 2012 happened, or something like, some big scale disaster that really wipes out a lot of the population, maybe I make it, maybe I don't. But part of me is excited for it, in the fact that, like, you don't have to work a 9-to-5 job anymore. You get to learn how to live off the land again. And like, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be a walk in the park. It's going to be full of suffering and stuff. But at the same time, like, the stressors that I have in my life currently, I can't fix any of those. No. But if everything hits the fan and now I have to learn how to grow my own food, that's putting the responsibility of my life directly in my hands. I don't have to wait for someone else to hire me. I don't have to hope that some world power isn't going to decide to launch a nuclear missile. I mean, I hope that's still not a concern then, but it's interesting too, like getting involved in astrology and learning about that, and learning about, just stuff that I've learned about when I was in archaeology, like studying in school. It does, and this is my own intuitive feeling as well, it does kind of feel like we're gearing up for like a Bronze Age collapse again. And I don't know how familiar you are with history, but in the Bronze Age, there was a huge, wide-scale, pretty much earth-spanning civilization collapse. And we don't really know why. It looks like it's a myriad of factors between like environmental, disease, war, and a polar shift as well. And there's been talk that and solar flares. And there's been talk that things are gearing up for another polar shift. It's looking like another one is coming. There's supposed to be a huge solar flare in 2024, 2025, I can't remember, that may potentially knock out a lot of technology. And so it's looking like the factors are lining up for that again, and astrologically as well. And I think it'll just be interesting to see like how that proceeds, because it looks like, especially with these upcoming transits here, it looks like things are sort of gearing up, maybe not right now for that wide-scale disaster, but it looks like it's gearing up for the first few smaller rumblings of large-scale shift like that. And I'm wondering, like, with the Capricorn energy shifting, like, I'm wondering how that narrative is going to change, or if people are going to finally wake up and be like, wow, people who think that their entire civilization is going to be wiped out, that's what capitalists want, because people who are scared of death are going to go spend more money now because, oh, what if I die? I won't have, this item, or I won't go on this trip or whatever. So I may as well buy, get a credit card and rack it up now and go do these things before I die. And then, when they do that and then they get the bill in the mail and they're not dead yet, like it's just roping you into that system again. Like it's
all about
narrative that serves a purpose. Sorry, what was that?
Oh, it's all about making those conscious choices and how.
Yeah, well, exactly. Like figuring out like what you are doing, where you're harming yourself and your planet because you're afraid of the end.
Right, and that's what we have to shift is this fear mongering of the planet ending. The planet isn't ending. It's feeling like that. It's feeling like
things definitely will end. That's for sure. But
some things will.
Still going to be, humanity's still going to be here, whether or not it's 8 billion people, or if it's only a couple million, or like people are still going to be here. And like you kind of have the choice of, do you want to be the ones that get to create the new world, or are you just going to roll over and let the powers that be have their way, kind of thing,
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so that's why we're just seeing all this stuff, come to surface with these structures in our governments, in our healthcare, in our schools, in our, all of these corporations, big tech, big corporations, because people are going, wait a minute, this isn't, we're kind of being led down we're being led down a garden path here, and they're finding other ways, and those other ways are going to become more acceptable. And as far as like the planet goes, I mean, I listened to some the psychic intuitive mediums that talk about what might become, and it helps people with their fears, just for them to tune into certain energies. But I do keep hearing, of course, that if we're worried about any kind of World War III, I mean, World War III would be nuclear involved. The actual other planets and extraterrestrial beings will not let that happen. Will not. Like, we have some protection.
Yeah, you even look at like UFO sightings in regards to like atomic weapon testing previously. There are so many accounts of very strange incidents happening after the first bombs were let loose, kind of thing, of these unexplained sightings of things that disabled nukes, things that disabled the control centers. Very, very common and very, very spooky. And whether or not it's aliens or extraterrestrials or the collective unconscious or whatever, like you could name it whatever you want. Obviously there is something that's preventing that, but also I don't think, like, you just look at the people who are in power and they want to make money. Destroying all the people that they're making money off of isn't going to serve their narrative. Like, there might be threats of nuclear war, I could definitely see that, but I don't think that anything's going to be launched. I mean, mutually assured destruction is mutually assured at this point. Like, if one person launches it, everybody's gone.
That's right, because I mean, the other planets, and the universal energy needs planet Earth around, so it won't be going that way, in my personal opinion either, if anybody cares about that, my personal opinion. But I feel like we have listen to other people whose work I trust, because they help keep people calm, and they actually answer certain questions from the public, and a lot of their work gets verified. So and I feel like we have a lot of protection happening, and we're going to have some integration too with the different extraterrestrial beings. I feel like, I mean, they're amongst us. It's just a matter of the government's kind of kept that hush hush too, right? So I feel like
there's definitely been some sort of intelligence here with us for as long as humanity's been here. I mean,
that's right.
It's just,
humanity wasn't ready
between everybody. Everyone's got some sort of story somewhere. So
that's for sure. Humanity wasn't ready for that whole part, but we're actually becoming more and more ready to accept that. And this Pluto in Aquarius definitely speaks to that. So this next 20 to 30 years, 30 years from now, things are going to look a whole bunch different. And so everyone, compared to the last 30 years, our next 30 years is going to exponentially feel like it's the shifts and change are a lot. So it's just a matter of like, okay, you know what? I'm in my own little kind of environment and community here. What do I value and how am I going to make a difference?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. Well, and I think that's key too, is like really, it is important to be aware of the global situations, but you as a person can't make much of a difference at that scale. And really all you're doing is just getting yourself on this little hamster wheel of anxiety of seeing how awful things are. But it's, it's chess pieces on a chessboard, really, and you don't have a hand in the game at all.
Yeah.
But you do on the local level. And that's one thing that, going from someone who is extraordinarily politically active and organizing protests for international events and stuff like that, it just became so much spinning my wheels of where it didn't matter what we did. And if it did matter in any way, shape, or form, it was taken out. I hesitate to say, the groups I was in were taken out by the government, but there were certain people who showed up out of nowhere, and within weeks, those groups were dissolved because of fighting that were started by these people who showed up out of nowhere. And in that regard, like you can't organize over the internet anymore. It's so easily infiltrated. Even if you are organizing in person, it's infiltrated. But people care more about, the opinions on the international scale. If you're organizing at a smaller level, and not even organizing, but just getting involved in like helping out with your local food bank, volunteering on your community board, being aware of your municipal and like provincial or state politics, as opposed to focusing so much energy internationally, you can make so much more of a difference in people whose lives you're directly involved in. And I'm kind of hoping with this Aquarius Pluto that's what we see more of, because so many people I know, like, I was talking to one of my friends, and her mental health is just tanked, and she's like, I'm doing everything I can. I'm sharing everything I can to keep people aware and informed. And I'm like, but what effects have you seen from that? And she's like, well, like my own mental health is awful because this is all I consume. And I'm like, okay, but like in the lives of people around you, have you seen a difference? And not really, because everything she's sharing is predominantly like American stuff. Like it's to do with American social issues. Not that Canada doesn't have similar ones, but it's just not really relevant for the people directly around her. I mean, it is to some extent, of course, like, like say like issues of racism. That is for sure something that she deals with as a person of color. But like the narratives that she's talking about are all American narratives, rather than, the Canadian narratives of say like missing and murdered Indigenous women or something like that. Like there's so much more that you can be involved in locally and have a direct impact. And then not only are you maybe sacrificing your mental health seeing how bad it is locally, but you're getting that boost of, oh wow, I just did this that had this difference with people down the street from me or something,
Yeah, no, that's right.
So I'm really hoping we see more of that, because I think with social media, so many people see the larger picture. They don't see, the smaller things going on around their home.
That's right. Yeah. And that's exactly where we need to look at our own value and what we need, what we can create in our own little community, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So I don't know what time we're at. I think we're probably close to an hour, a little over. Is there anything you want to do close off with? Or did we cover most of the bases?
No, actually, I think we covered most of the bases that we'll go into for now, for sure, because we kind of hit that end of the year.
Yeah.
And just preparing for what's coming up with the holidays and the retrograde and all that kind of thing. That's about that's kind of where we're at, and how things go once we hit December too. So it's sort of finding that way to bring some joy in, but at the same time allow yourself to rest. And if you're feeling like you're in go mode, but go mode is getting Saturned, just have patience with it and know it is just a passing energy. And also another really good thing is to if there's some things that you want to just sort of take, because you might have some time perhaps over the holidays or whatever that you want to revisit, initiating them now is great, because like whatever you kind of get involved in, like what's great to do during the retrograde, of course, is to rewrite and redo and look at you know, where you can reorganize or regroup or you know, re anything. So during the retrograde. So anything that you kind of are thinking about initiating but might need some refinement, yeah, give it a go here as quickly this week as you can. At least, you know, start that group or start that book or start whatever it is that you're looking at, and then you can refine it over the retrograde period.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for joining me again. It's always super informative. Every time we talk, I'm like, oh, I gotta look this up. I gotta look that up. I get like this list of things that I gotta research once we're done.
Yes.
So I'm hoping other people get the same thing out of it. But yeah, so like I said at the start here, you can find Diana at Out Amongst the Stars Astrology on YouTube, outamongstthestars.com for her website. And yeah, get in touch through those platforms, I guess. And yeah, thank you for joining me. Hopefully we'll get another one of these in, I guess, well, I was going to say in a month's time, but it's going to be Christmas around then. So maybe we'll just do one in the new year. That would be kind of cool.
Yeah, right after the retrograde, for sure.
Yeah.
That would be perfect. That'd be a great time. We'll see what's kind of come about for our first few months of the year. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Great.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Cass.
Yeah,
it
for
was
sure.
a pleasure. We'll talk soon. Take care, everyone.